Welcome to the show, history buffs and friends of history, and hello to you from whatever place you're listening to us today. This is Evan, Bethany, and Kaleb, your hosts.
Hello.
Hello.
We're all members of the University of Maine Presque Isle History Club, and we are broadcasting from the WUPI in 92.1 FM in Presque Isle. On this episode of our podcast series, we will be talking about some of the native tribes of New England, but we will also try to give a small overview of what tribes we have here in New England. With us today, we have a very special guest, a University of Maine Presque Isle student, Kendra Bear-Perley, from the Maliseet First Nation Tribe from New Brunswick. Welcome to the show, Kendra.
Hi.
So, thank you for coming again, and we appreciate that you accepting our invitation. I'd like to open a little bit about, tell us again where you're from and what's your personal relationship in your everyday life being from a native tribe, being a Native American.
So I'm Maliseet Indian. So I'm from the Woolastook River, which is technically in Canada it's called the St. John River. We span from everywhere from like the Aroostook County to all of New Brunswick up to Quebec in some places. I grew up on reserve in Mashpee First Nation, which is just across the border from Fort Fairfield, and yeah.
That's great. I think at the end we should totally touch upon life on the reserve. I think that'll be really cool.
No, I'm so glad to share that.
So again, and we also have Bethany, one of our members. How about you tell us, Bethany, what tribes you are from?
I am from the Mashpee Wampanoag Tribe, and I am a Mi'kmaq from First Nations in Canada, Prince Edward Island.
Great. All right. So.
But I did not grow up on a reservation.
Which is also important to get the other aspect of it. Of course, yeah. So before we begin our conversation and talk about your guys' perspective from your guys' tribes, I'd like to give an overview of and elaborate on some of the names of the tribes in the region. To begin with, when we talk about New England, we're not talking just about our traditional New England states like Maine, Massachusetts, New Hampshire. Native tribes, and I like Bethany to touch on them, are not divided in our perception of states.
Right. And I think Kendra can speak on this too, being from Canada. Mm-hmm. Borders didn't really exist with us, and they were made after we existed. And so when we talk about like Maliseet and Holton versus Maliseet and Tobic,
they were the same kind of people.
The same people. We have people whose families are split up, and
like cousins
and
wives
and literally down the middle.
Yeah.
We had. Some tribes have dual citizenship or are able to. I think Kendra can touch on that a little bit more than I can, but
yeah, because my tribe, they're the Woolastook, and we spanned up into the Aroostook River as well, which is originally the Moose River, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, so they got that messed up. So
Moosehead, yeah.
No, just Moose River.
The Moose River, yeah.
Yeah, so we spanned everywhere that the river basically touched. So our people would meet once a year during summer when we had lots of food, and we would all get together and basically like party it up, and there would be marriages and weddings.
Yeah, seasonal
parties,
rotation.
And then during the colder months, we would all regress into our hideouts in the wilderness.
Yep.
So,
of course, yeah. Great. So, again, when we talk about today's episode, it's going to focus on New England. We call it the New England tribes of the tribes of New England, but we are also including Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and Quebec, and
Prince Edward Island.
Prince Edward Island. We include these in the same description under the same name. So, first things first. All of these tribes that we're going to talk about today are identified under the
Algonquin.
peoples, and thank you for the pronunciation. She's great help because I can't do those. And of course, as we said, we're talking about a larger perception of how we divide lands when it comes to native tribes. Let's begin, and what I'm gonna do is just go through some of the native tribes that I have on my list, and we can open the map as well. First, I have the Wampanoag. And please, if I make any mistake in my pronunciation, you can help me out.
Wampanoag.
Okay.
Is the English way to say it.
So today, Wampanoag people are enrolled in the two federally recognized tribes, the Mashpee Wampanoag Tribe and the Wampanoag Tribe of Gayhead in Massachusetts. We have the Massachusetts Tribe that lives in the Boston area. We have the Nipmuc Tribe that is in Middle Massachusetts, right on top of Rhode Island. We have the Pennacook Tribe that was in the Merrimack River in New Hampshire and a little bit of Massachusetts. Also, a small portion of southern Maine, and they are sometimes called the Pawtucket peoples. Then we go to the Penobscots, that they are a federally recognized tribe in Maine, and they're a First Nation band governments in the Atlantic provinces and Quebec. Because I talked about the Penobscot, and Kendra, please feel free to jump at any moment. We have the Wabanaki Confederacy that we all know, of course, that we learned in school, and that's made of 6 tribes: the Penobscots, like I just mentioned, the Abenaki, the Passamaquoddy, the Maliseet, and the Mi'kmaq. Correct?
Yes.
Right. Then we're moving on to the Passamaquoddy, that they're mainly in Maine and New Brunswick. Mm-hmm. Then the and Bethany can help me with the pronunciation of this one, the Quinnipiac.
Quinnipiac, yeah.
The Quinnipiac, okay, in Connecticut. The Mohegan, also in Connecticut, and the Pequot, also in Connecticut. And of course, from the Pequot, we have the first instance of organized genocides in our nation, and probably one of the earliest ones as well, where a systematic government is trying to exterminate peoples. And we talked a little bit about in one of our previous episodes with Christian discovery and colonization.
Yep.
Following, we have the Pecomtuck from Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Vermont. And then the Tunksis. Tunaxis from Connecticut. Thank you, Bethany. We're moving on a little bit more south, and we go to the Narragansetts in Rhode Island. And and now I'm going to move on to Kendra's waters, the Abenaki, that are located in northern New England, present-day Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, and what is eastern Quebec. So they established tracing, of course, they're known for establishing those trading relationships with the French colonists and in the St. Lawrence River. Following, we have, and that's the last group in my list, the Mohican. They're located in western New England in the upper Hudson Valley, and close to Albany and New York. Not particularly in New England the way we see it today, but they're including in here. And these groups were more focused in agriculture. All right, that was a lot of names, and I know you guys are looking at your phones trying to find new information. You guys are cheaters.
I'm looking at a map.
He outed us.
All right.
I'm looking at a map. It's not cheating.
I'm actually looking at the
because I
script,
can't
Evan.
see
So help me out here and help.
You guys had a script?
Oh yeah, you want it?
So help me out here and help the audiences as well. We have a lot of tribes, a lot of names. Why so many in such a small area?
Well, think about Europe. There's so many different people groups within that small area.
Fair. I like that. I like the comparison. Okay.
Yeah.
I can work with that. And being under the same linguistic group, and I think we have like a stronger connection between these peoples versus peoples in like the Mohegans in New York and the southern tribes, like in
Stronger
in
connections
western.
Between who? Sorry.
The New England tribes. versus tribes in the West, or am I wrong here? Like,
What do
what's
you
the
mean?
relationship?
I find the relationship you often hear about more of like Western natives.
Yeah,
taking a stand
I
because
feel
they
yeah,
have a
they're
larger population.
larger.
They're larger amounts of land. Like the
Definitely.
Navajo
Yeah,
is
Dinah.
literally like
Cree
huge.
people. Holy moly, there's so many of them.
Holy.
Okay, so what's the relationship between these tribes that are just
In New England.
listed? Yes.
Well, I'd say like on the East Coast we're pretty small. We're pretty forgotten too, I think.
Yeah,
even in
feel-
Canada,
I feel inner nation to nation relationships are pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't overly hate each other.
No,
now.
I don't think
feel like
we
we
at
found
all-
a common enemy. Not in that way. But the struggle is all
we kind of
collective.
just recognize each other as being from Indian country, I think.
Yeah.
All right, so we're listing all of these tribes, and we kind of talked about the relationship between them, the interconnection that they had, and as Kendra said, they have good ties. They're not enemies. They're not something like that. How about historically?
Historically, there was
Big beef. No.
there was a lot of beef, even though cattle didn't exist here yet. There was issue with
Skoden. Sorry.
let's let our guest speak.
I know she got my joke. I made a joke. It was funny.
You're distracting me. So with the Maliseet, I imagine much more food foragers. So with our food foraging kind of tribes, the Iroquois were very much almost like a predator, if you think about it. Like these.
Yeah.
Like these groups, they were very small. They broke up into family cells and were generally just not built for warfare.
Okay.
And the Iroquois were. So it got very violent.
So there's that part of it, but then we also have like coastal people. So we're talking my tribe, Mashpee Wampanoag. We're talking
Micmacs.
Micmacs are coastal too, but they're also
very coastal.
Yeah.
There's a lot of coast in
yeah,
New
there's a lot of
Brunswick.
coast and PEI, but
with the Micmac and my people, the Maliseet. Well, I'm both. So I'm not gonna lie.
yes.
But
That's something we should touch on. Micmacs and Maliseets
yeah,
are the same.
they're not the same, but
well, you know what I mean.
That was my following question, to go on each individual. Give us that personal insight.
So with the Micmac and Maliseet is that the word actually is a Micmac word. It means slow talkers and muskrat eaters. They had a lot of slurs for us. They didn't really like us. We traded, but they generally had some distaste.
Slow talkers from down the river.
It's like,
essentially.
those guys.
Yeah.
I mean, we kind of see that with New England today, like people from Vermont, for example, they're this kind of, stereotype, and you have people from Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Americans and Canadians. Like
yeah.
People's reactions that are from Aroostook to Portland, even then.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
So you have that still with the native.
Yeah, for sure.
You have their prejudice, their whatever, but I mean
stereotypes.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, no, so back to the point of food foragers or whatever you were talking about there. Passamaquoddy are definitely coastal. Mashpee Wampanoag, Penobscot, Micmac, all coastal. So there's that kind of divide too. Not really a divide, but like just culturally, like how the tribes lived,
like existed and survived.
And to give a geographical perspective for our audiences that might not know where these tribes are, where they're located primarily in Maine and New Brunswick, if I'm correct, and
Maliseet, Maine, New Brunswick. We're basically everywhere the river,
river.
If you
water.
think about not just generally water because there's a ton of water in the ocean. But
oh wow, I don't know that fact.
But if you look at, our people are generally surrounded the Woollistic River, which is the St. John River, and it is a massive river. There's multiple different offshoots of it, and our people surrounded that. So that was their lifeblood, their home range kind of thing. Like, that's where they thrived and they knew the land. When you talk about Micmac peoples, they knew how to survive on the coast, along with a lot of other
same for
that's
Mashpee Wampanoag and Wampanoag people in general, and pretty much every tribe from Massachusetts. Definitely coastal people thrive off of the quahog.
And that's where we get the legendary canoes too.
Yep.
Oh, yes.
Yes, for sure. From both tribes, honestly.
Sure,
Birch bark canoes
canoes are the best canoes ever.
Which helped, of course, European settlers as well
when they get through
when
and navigate.
they did their going into the wilderness and stuff. That's what they used.
When they were surveying.
I think it's really important to mention that.
Yep.
Yeah. Kudos to us.
Yeah, for real.
Technology. I mean, you don't think of that. I mean, when we talk about the native tribes, our minds and how we've been taught all these years is there are these peoples that live in the teepees and they have fires and they go hunt.
Have you ever heard that joke? My teepee has running water.
So, and that's a big problem. I mean, in our institutions today, we never think about their technology. We never think about their way of thinking, their way of connections. Lately, we've been getting some of those messages that are trying to get integrated. But again, I do like to mention stuff like that about technology, and please feel free to add that in. And, and the importance. I mean, if we think about it, it's huge.
Popcorn. Yeah, of course. Technology, popcorn. Technology. I don't think it just extends to like physical like things like I'm gonna throw Dave's name out because he's not here, but if you take any class with Dave, honestly, it becomes a Native Studies class. But I took his
as it should be.
Yeah, for real.
And Dave,
talking about Dave Putnam.
Dave Putnam.
Yes, let me put some information. Dave Putnam is a professor here at the University of Maine Pascal. That he's focusing on native environmental science, archaeology.
He's an archaeologist, geologist, you name it, he's done it. He's an artist too. So.
But he has a strong connection with the native tribes here in the area.
He works closely with the Maliseet and Holton. I know that for sure. But
and we did extend an invitation to him, but something happened and he couldn't make it, so we're very sorry about that.
Indian time.
Maybe say he gave us no heads up. He kind of didn't show.
But
can't figure out how to drive his car backwards.
So back to technology. So we had to do a lot of projects on from the beginning of like crossing the Bering Strait from what they assume is Serbia, and all these are just like hypotheses based off of
Serbia,
and they're largely debunked.
At this point. Siberia. That's what I mean. Okay. Sorry. Siberia.
Yeah, Russia.
I'm so sorry.
In Alaska. Russia, Alaska, when there was the ice sheet.
I always say it wrong
thousands of years ago,
I'm inept at this point. But anyway.
They found that it's not the only theory at this point.
Right, but I mean,
it's possible.
But this is something that we discuss in the class, and basically technology, how it evolved and how we got here through pointal, like arrows and not arrowheads, but points for spears and that kind of thing, and flint napping and that kind of thing. So I could go into that. A lot of our technology revolves around just basic survival. So like using the animal for all of its parts. Most all of its parts, honestly.
Some of them you don't want.
Yeah. But and then like horticulture is a huge thing too.
Of course.
So technology really extends to that and to clothing, for like.
I mean, when it comes to
agriculture,
that's where we come to the Three Sisters.
Yes. The Three Sisters. Yep. Corns, bean,
and squash.
Corn, bean, and squash.
Yeah.
So I mean, just like the ways that they figured things out to survive,
which is really important, and not to elaborate a lot on that, on the technology piece, but I think it's great to use it once in a while, to focus on that these peoples were not just some people that lived in the forest. They were really organized.
Yes, they were. They're definitely
even living in the forest. Like I know my people, we know it so well that it's generally like it's like farming free range style.
Yeah, exactly.
Of course, yes.
Yeah.
Great. So, let us use you two, Bethany and Kendra, as our source of information, because Kaleb and myself are now really very well knowledgeable on these topics, but we try our best to keep updated. Let's start with Kendra being our guest, and I'm gonna put you on the spot, Kendra. I hope you don't mind.
I do.
And,
I'm just kidding.
To all of our guests, again, Kendra is Maliseet, correct?
Yes.
Yes. So, talk to us about your tribe, and once we get done with that, we'll talk about a little bit about your life as a young Native American woman in today's society. So, talk about your tribe a little bit.
That's a big topic.
We're gonna just touch on it. We're not gonna go dive into it.
Yeah, that would be a whole other episode.
Of course, of
That's
course.
a
And
whole other
and we're happy to
series.
have it.
Yeah, so let me gather my thoughts here for a second.
Just start off easy. Where are you from?
Where am I from?
No,
I am
I'm
from Tobic First Nations. It's one of the largest reserves in size, and we have quite a bit of population. I mean, a lot of people move out because there's really nothing there.
So I can use questions to help you out.
Please.
So is this, when we talk about your tribe, we know some tribes are now organized, right? They don't have a reservation to begin with, but you guys do have a reservation.
We do, and we have government, we have a chief, we have a council,
Mm-hmm.
chief and council.
So how does that work for our listeners that don't know how a reservation works? How is the structure?
Well, the band runs everything. So to be our First Nations is we just received independence almost from the government. So basically, our community there is a chief and a council, and some of the time we have representatives from the white government as well, and there's elections held to elect chief and council members. So you have vote for so and so. It's just almost
pretty much the
identical
same
to
way as,
for
So it's
like
like a
normal
government
government.
within a government.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you guys decide your own matters and your own laws and stuff like that.
For the most part, yeah.
Kind of. It's more specific to the actual res.
Yeah,
than-
they're all. It's like there's a reserve. Each reserve has its own chief. and
Of course,
They
yeah,
also
so-
have to abide by the laws of like the land, but like it's
The
so it's not like
Canada.
completely like we're making our own country right now.
Even
But-
though that we like most reserves do have sovereignty in Canada,
Yep, yeah.
America is not the same
way
They're
at
seen
all.
as cities,
They're
if
seen
that.
as like
towns.
not even a city.
Yeah, it's incredibly
Disorganized.
It's complicated. So for my reserve, we have chief and council, and we have members of the government who work in training centers and schools and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
So let's how is it living on a reserve, being a reserve resident?
I would assume it's like everywhere else, honestly.
Yeah.
Like
The
the thing about that I find is a lot of people assume that it's going to be some sort of weird foreign country, and the fact is it's not. It is basically the same as every town you've ever been to, except everybody there is native and the occasional white person that wanders in.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, like, I've been to a lot of different places, and I can say that your experiences there aren't going to be wildly different. Our reserves are quite isolated in Canada. There are some places where the reserves are right in cities, but the place where I'm from is very rural. Like, walking home is not ideal for me. If I were to work in the main center of, like, where the businesses and stuff are, and I wanted to walk home, I need a big stick. There's the risk of bear, moose, you know.
And I have a few questions that I want to develop here, but what's the status of ownership of the land? Is it respected? Is it threatened every once in a while? What have you seen as a young person?
Land claims have been a big thing for me because our technical, for Tobic First Nation, this is what I'm speaking from, we had a big land claim just go through, and what happened is that the colonists, they built in our land that Canada gave to us, that they reserved for us, and so all that land was taken away from the native people. You know, they weren't allowed in basically because of segregation kind of stuff. So the land claims, basically they said, okay, we're going to give you guys financial compensation for all of that land, which is absolutely ridiculous because when it comes to land for native people, it is our lifeblood, you know. Living off of that, the medicines that you can find in the wilderness, all of that stuff, that's our culture. So saying that is worth monetary value is absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, and I'd like to say, like, land claims are still going on today. Like,
yes.
Treaties are not settled.
Of course,
in
we
Canada
see that in the
or
West,
even
of
in
course.
America today. They're totally, like, my tribe is going through land claim issues now with the government. So it's, you know, it's ongoing issue. Like, people like to think that, especially in America, and I said this earlier, but, you know, people don't really think of us as existing still. So I think that's part of the issue. And when we talk about monetizing land, it gets into, it's not only like a politically aggravated situation, it's definitely cultural, because it's so
personal.
Deep. It's personal.
Which is really sad, because I mean, seeing where the native tribes started from, the extent of their land to what it is now, and even trying to cut them more, personally, that is very sad to see. And I hope it changes in the future. You know, young governments come up, young people have different ideas, but I hope that changes soon. But it is pretty sad. Now, back to the reservation part. Is there any discrimination that goes against it? Like, if you tell somebody that doesn't know about Native Americans that you are from a reservation, will they see you just as, if I say I'm from Boston, or will they see you with a different eye? If you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I know. Growing up, big of a backstory for me. I grew up on reserve, but I didn't end up going to the reserve school because we had grades from like kindergarten to like grade 6 or grade 7 in Canada, and I ended up going immediate to the white school, like 15 minutes away, and I faced a lot of discrimination. I faced a lot of what would be considered illegal acts towards myself because I was one of the few Native people from reserve that went to white school. So I faced a lot of discrimination. My grades were poor, even though I'm incredibly smart. But when I do tell people from areas surrounding, like the colonial areas surrounding Native reserves and land, they cringe. They say, like, oh, you guys are all a bunch of drunks because so like all that weird prejudice that doesn't
it does exist.
Make sense. It doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense that it's discriminated
but it
against.
does exist.
It does exist.
Yeah.
No, I think especially for like up here, and I'm speaking from personal experience of like firsthand experiencing it, and like friends and their stories of because I didn't grow up around here exactly, but the sorry, the discrimination faced, it's especially since it's from like such a small area around here. People talk, like we're on a small campus now. Everybody talks about gossip. Everybody knows what everybody did. So it's generally the same way, except now we're adding the factor that, we've already separated segregation and we have different cultures. So then with the applied like stereotypes, it's like like I have a friend whose family members. It's hard
yeah,
to talk about, but like
yeah.
if something happens that's bad and like like people find out about it, they'll hold it against you. They'll be like, oh,
Yeah.
or they'll talk about those people's family members like in front of their face, just because it's such a small knit community.
Yeah.
And especially up here, I think.
Oh yeah.
And everywhere really, but like you just like people know names and people use
Yeah.
it against you. I've heard and
small
it's happened to
village
me.
country,
It's hard, but yeah.
But
Okay,
like for reserve, just getting back to that, and the prejudice that comes with that, I find a lot of people, if I'm in the city and they don't have a reserve nearby, they don't care. But when it comes to people who live near it and they have all these stereotypes, like their parents, oh, don't go to the reserve, you'll get addicted to drugs immediately.
Have strong opinions. Yeah.
And all these strong opinions that aren't factual, they freak out and they're like, oh, I have all these awful things to think about you now. But when you meet people who don't grow up around that, they don't care.
So what would be one thing that will make the Maliseet tribe, and that's more of a personal question because I want to see, how you see your tribe through your eyes. What will be one thing from your culture that will make you distinct from another tribe, for example? What comes first in your mind?
I think the river.
The river?
Yeah,
okay.
the specific river we grew up on, and where our culture and our beliefs are all based around, because if you look at the creation stories, we have Glooskap, who he's a giant, just for preface. He in his canoe, he dug into the ground and created the Woollistuk, and that's our stories. That's what we believe. It's all based around our environment that we lived in.
And that's something we see a lot with a variety of native groups that are very connected to the place that they're from. So your group, the Maliseet, of course, have the river.
I'm sorry, did I talk about the Woollistuk and what that means? I feel like that's very important.
So
he created the river with like one push of his canoe paddle, and the river is named now. Well, it has been named the Woollistuk. They renamed it the St. John River, whatever. But the Woollistuk is what we're based around, and it even shows in our language. Like our people call ourselves, like, Maliseet is a word that is Mi'kmaq. That's what people call us, but we call ourselves the Woollistukwewi, which means the people of the beautiful and bountiful river, sorry. So it goes to show that people really are controlled by their environment, and it matters to them.
Thank you, yeah.
No problem.
What about you, Bethany, and what would be one thing... I know you did not grow up in a reserve, so I guess I'll go with that question. Not growing up in a reserve, how does it make you feel more different? And I'm trying to get I don't mean to get personal on these questions, but I'm trying to through these questions create a deeper understanding through you of your culture.
Right. So there's contrary to popular belief, Indians exist outside of reserves. So growing up in a city, basically I definitely, because I'm Massachusetts, it's not like up here. It's definitely more urbanized and that kind of thing. But so it's different because we have we would go to events and that kind of thing, and that's how we would connect. And there is reserves in Massachusetts, but they're not very big and they're not populated. And even in Prince Edward Island, where my family's from, that reserve is 50 people, if that. So it's kind of just kind of going to most cultural lessons that I got on my own culture were from home, or when we would go and celebrate our recognition day kind of thing, or just powwow. But I growing up in the city, I didn't really have too many experiences outside of like, you know, like what Kendra, I didn't get, you know, taunted for being Indian. It was mostly like, oh, you're native? Like, I didn't even know you existed.
I got that too.
like Thanksgiving. And like, I would always be like, you know, just general, like, you know, childish stuff. But, yeah, because natives aren't really thought of in Massachusetts at all. Really.
I feel like with the growing up off reserve thing, there is prejudice even within native communities. We don't
for sure.
Some don't believe that those growing up with like outside of their community means that they're not native anymore, and that's not right.
It's not right.
It's very
it's
interesting,
not
though.
true. It's because so the way indigenous culture works normally is you are native if you are raised in the culture. Like, it's pretty much accepted. Like,
I think that comes
to
down
an extreme story. Like, if you were to be like kidnapped or something.
Well, that comes back
to
the residential schools and stuff like that, where they basically kidnap these children and to put them into boarding schools, to create native white people, basically.
Right. Kendra and I both have family that were in reservation schools, so there's that.
Residential schools.
That's what I mean.
So we're having an I like that you mentioned the residential schools.
Yes.
Right? And I like that you mentioned that, because my next question was going to be, throughout history and from the time of colonization even all the way to today, or a few years back, or like 20 years back, up back to the 80s, these groups face strong challenges, strong beliefs against them. They faced a lot of harshness and difficulties in trying to develop.
Racism.
Like, of course, yes. What do they do in order to defend that? How do they keep their communities together?
Ooh, that's a steep question.
Thank you.
Well, I think going back on the Dakota Access Pipeline, there's kind of like, so we have this idea of like, we don't look at ourselves as like, oh, you're, how we were talking about earlier, like, oh, you're from Boston and you're from Maine, or, you're from Massachusetts, you're from Maine. It's kind of like Indian country.
Yeah, you see somebody and you're like, hey, nice earrings.
We're native, so it's just kind of like, we recognize that we're from different tribes and we have different, like, cultural differences within ourselves, but we are united with this, sense of community and camaraderie. And so when we see things like the Dakota Access Pipeline, we had people from all over, and Indian country extends to, like, the native Aborigines in Australia.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like most indigenous peoples all over the world are facing the same issues. Exactly. If we think about the
Sami people from Scandinavia came and helped us protest that.
And
Maori people
who are currently going through an issue.
And Hawaii is going through something too. But so it's just kind of like just a big band of united band of brothers.
Everybody's just all in the same boat, all in the same canoe.
Great. Well, that's good. At least you keep it together, you keep it strong. You guys are the future of possibly your tribes, possibly of Native American identity.
Oh, I hope so.
Yeah,
I hope so too.
Nothing happens to me.
What do you think personally? What do you think personally of what our state of Maine did with the Indigenous Peoples Day?
It's a step forward in the right direction.
Okay.
Acknowledgement.
Yeah, that's what we need.
Yeah.
For both Canada and America. Currently, America has no acknowledgement of sovereignty treaties or anything, really.
Yeah, Canada seems to like to brush things under the rug.
They say that they acknowledge, and there has been talks of acknowledgement.
But it's all just saving face, basically. Yes. It's I know, talking about certain politicians and how they pretend to care about Native issues, but then they turn around and cause more problems for Indigenous peoples in Canada.
And here there's virtually nothing. In America, on the American side, there's literally nothing.
Yeah.
It's tough, but it's real.
Okay. Well, let's move into a break.
Dark
and
questions.
So at this point, we would like to thank WPI 92.1 FM for hosting our podcast. We wanted to let you know that WPI is now available online, but also on the TuneIn app. So make sure you click the subscribe button and listen to Ampi's and Prescal's #1 hit music station. If you want to keep up with WPI's and Ampi's events and news, make sure you like their page on Facebook and Instagram. Also, if you want to find more about our podcast series and if you want to listen to any of our previous podcasts, make sure to follow our podcast on SoundCloud and YouTube by simply searching History Hour Podcast, and make sure you throw some likes at us. All right, and so again, welcome back to our podcast, and this is a more alternative episode that we have here today with some very interesting conversations and some very interesting topics that we have to answer, because again, they're really tough, because they're really personal sometimes, and
Native issues they're very
of
personal. I mean, it comes to, like, if you think about your culture, like, if I came to attack
Greece, like
Uh,
the Trojan horses that we are.
you might get a little defensive. I mean, like
absolutely, yeah.
So it's, when it comes to Native people, it's incredibly personal, even though that's what the issues are.
And I have a question next before we go into Bethany's side of the story, because we talked a little bit about you, Kendra.
Of course.
I want to go into Bethany again and get a little bit more about her people, away from her personal stuff. But I guess to help our followers, because there is always that conversation of how we should call Native tribes, Native people. You're Native American. I do not like the idea of being called an Indian. I think that is a thing of the past. But today you have people that get really offensive, even if I call you Native. They want to be called Indigenous, which it's fair. It's a fair point, because they go under the point the natives. It's everybody that was born in the States now, so you're just an American. So what's your thought of that?
I think
I remember my mom talking about this, and she's the last generation of Native people. So I mean, when it comes down to that, I feel like it's a personal struggle. It depends on where you grew up, what you faced, what racism you faced. I know my mom's fine with being called an Indian. I'm not. I feel like it was used against me as a slur, and I feel like I'm not very comfortable with that kind of thing. When it comes to, I'm so sorry.
No, you're good. No.
But when it comes to that kind of stuff, it is very personal, and I feel like the easiest way to avoid that kind of issue is talk. What is their tribe name? What specific group are you talking about? Is it Maliseet? Is it Cree? Is it Iroquois? Is it
Dinah?
Is it even Maori?
Yeah.
Is it like
Sami?
Yeah.
I think for Americans specifically, speaking from personal experience, I know a lot of people who are fine with being called Native American. I know people who are fine with being called Indian. Personally, I think a lot of people, and it's like a lot of the older generation, like a lot of for instance, my mom's friend introduced me to her stepdaughter as an American Indian. And I absolutely hated that. It makes me cringe. Generally, like, just Native,
and
or
calling somebody an Indian is just generally confusing, because
it
India isn't a country.
Yeah,
well,
exactly.
It's a country. Like,
it's not a state of being.
Well, how I see it from a historical perspective,
existed.
it was wrong to begin with.
Yes,
So I don't see any reason why the continuation.
Yeah.
No. I feel like it's mostly died out, but now we're at the point between native and indigenous.
Indigenous,
and
yeah.
I know my mom said, she's like, indigenous makes me feel like a plant.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And that's my point. We know that's what it means, like indigenous, you're from this land, but I think native gives more of a sense of ownership. This land is yours. You're native to this land.
Yeah, and the thing is too that I feel like noting is just like I just had an issue with trying to explain what I was to somebody who didn't know, and just having to read the textbook description of like what it is, because I said indigenous and they're like, what's indigenous? And I was like, Native American. They're like, what? And I said Indian, and they were like, oh.
Yeah, it's
and
a
it's
long,
like
it's a process.
It is a process, and I feel like awareness is the key to that. I mean, if you know every single tribe in the States, kudos to you, first of all. There's so many of us.
Yep.
But then you would be able to say, the person that you're talking to would be able to say, oh, well, I'm Cree, I'm like Blackfoot,
right.
I'm
Pickany, yeah.
Yeah.
It, like, I think from where we're coming from, it's just like kind of like, the recognition of like maybe not using the word, calling us native, but also like recognizing that the land that you're on, no matter where you are in America or Canada or anywhere really, that has like indigenous people, is you're on a land that was inhabited way before your ancestors got here, and just kind of recognizing that there's history, and it's not just like, oh, it's a brand new place. Like a lot of people think of America as just being brand new, especially Europeans. I've had Europeans, America's a brand new country. It never existed. There was so much that happened here before they got here. So it's just kind of just,
the country
recognizing
America, the name is new.
Right, exactly. But like recognizing that you are standing on native land.
Of course.
Turtle Island, guys.
Yep.
Of course. Well, thank you for that. And let's go back to Bethany. I know you talked a little bit about the relationship of your tribe with the sea and kind of like relating back to Kendra's story, but do you have anything else you want to add on that?
Yeah, so I guess basically kind of like a brief history. I'm Mashpee Wampanoag, and I'm Micmac from Prince Edward Island, but I mostly identify with Mashpee Wampanoag. We call ourselves Wampanoag, and our language is Wampanoag. We basically the seafaring people, I guess is what you would call it.
Yeah.
Not to be like a Viking, but similar to that. But we I think even Micmac, I don't know about Malice. No, you guys' name means something different, but people of the first light is what our name means. The state of Massachusetts, that name means the land between two blue hills, or the Blue Hills, the Great Blue Hills, what have you. And Kendra talked a little bit about her creation story of
of the Willistok.
Yeah. Ours is just basically like a big giant guy named Moshep, and he just kind of like took his boot and made Massachusetts, and built the land from stuff that he had on him, and then a lot of our stories are like we talked earlier about Bougamouge and stuff like that. So we have like similar things.
Yeah, there's always a giant dude, some little people.
Yeah, it's a giant dude, some little
wizards.
people. Yeah, I think it's pretty,
I mean, even out west, they have little people. They have giants.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder what was here.
Yeah, right.
That's a good point.
But we're also known as like the Thanksgiving tribe. We're one of the first documented linguistically, because we had like not first contact exactly, obviously, because we had like Virginia, but like when you think of like mass immigration, sort of mass immigration for the time, it was here. And so there's that. And then a fun fact, I guess, is I don't know if people are Harry Potter fans here, but J.K. Rowling is basing her mystical American wizarding
I'm not a
school.
fan anymore.
Yeah, I know. She's basing her. It's not a fun fact.
For mystical creatures.
Her mystical creatures. No, but you know, like the Hogwarts houses. So like we have like stories of the horned serpent or oh gosh, what other one is she
Thunderbird.
Using? Thunderbird is a big one.
Oh,
That is like universal between a lot of native cultures.
Yeah.
Actually.
I mean, we have a bird that creates storms.
Yeah,
too, so
yeah.
He's called the Wind Eagle.
Oh
though.
yeah,
From Thunderbird. Yep.
From the movie. Yeah.
Yeah. So horned serpent.
From the movie.
Yeah.
I had no idea about this. That's really cool.
So those are all our stories. Actually, she's basing it off of Massachusetts Mashpee Wampanoag lore.
That's really awesome.
Her houses, at least.
I don't even.
And I think a couple other things. I can't remember exactly everything about the book because she hasn't quite come out with it yet, and I don't even know what's going on. But she's doing a lot of that.
That's
based
really
off of
awesome.
it.
It's
It's.
awesome.
I mean, it's awesome in the fact that she did her
little.
research, but
A
I
little
feel like
research.
people are like, it can be used.
Cultural appropriation is a
Yes.
big
Yep.
topic among
Yeah.
Native people.
That's
and
true,
it's,
yeah.
It's a real issue with us because there's a bit of people want to hoard the information. They want to keep it to themselves so that like people don't abuse the culture. Like there's people who go to music festivals wearing traditional headdresses for ceremony
Moccasins.
and then doing drugs. That's not acceptable.
Exactly. Yeah.
Moccasins are shoes. I don't have any cultural stuff really.
I mean
But the style of dress is
the
very
regalia.
Yeah, that's what I
important.
mean. Like,
Regalia is very important to us. I mean, you have the jingle dresses. You have
ribbon dresses.
dream catchers are a big one.
Oh
they
my
do
gosh.
have a real
That is
significance.
everywhere.
They have a
That is
significant
everywhere, though.
meaning
Everybody
in
has one.
Ojibwe culture, and I don't actually. There's a lot of there's different opinions on having a dream catcher. I personally don't because it's not part of my tribe.
I think it became like an American pop
It
culture kind
is,
of thing.
Yeah. I know the story is the spider showed people how to catch.
Isn't it Ojibwe?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It's Ojibwe, and the story is the spider taught humans how to catch bad spirits in a net,
In a web. You
and
know.
then make the web, and the sun will come and burn away the bad spirits.
Right.
The issue with that, though, is I personally do make dream catchers, and I do believe in that kind of stuff. It sounds a little ridiculous, but like there's a lot of spirituality and religion when it comes to that kind of thing. And so reducing it down to like a cool image to get tattooed on your body, even though that's completely blasphemous to the real reason of what dream catchers are.
And this is kind of hypocritical because I know a lot of natives who have the dream catcher tattooed on them or eagle feathers.
Yeah,
but it's
they're valid.
Yeah, that's
there's
true.
there's so little imagery left because
we gotta hold on to what we have.
the cultural genocide that happened to our people with residential schools and with actual genocide. It just there's so
many little
things that we hold on to so dearly.
Like,
so cultural appropriation is absolutely unacceptable for Native people. We get very defensive about it.
And I can clearly see why. I mean, even me personally and Kaleb probably has some stuff. You didn't talk at all today, but it's okay. I mean, we learn. That's what this podcast it's about. That we learn from our conversations. So I think Kaleb learned a lot today, and I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah, great.
So, and I do see that a lot, and it's a great topic to touch on, and we need to close soon. So, not having a lot of connection with Native American culture, I've always seen, even in Europe, what is a Native American is somebody that has, feathers in his head. Not true at all. That doesn't exist in any culture, probably.
Might have. Yeah, I don't know. Some stereotypes come from somewhere, but they're not acceptable. But knowing myself, I worked in the film industry briefly, and I aim to again. That really drives home stereotypes sometimes. And
why don't you talk about your experience with that?
Yeah, okay.
Okay, Tom.
A little brief.
Yeah, so basically, I worked for Outlander, which is a historical romance novel.
All the little middle-aged white women are screaming right now. Outlander.
So basically, when I auditioned, they wanted the stereotype. That's what they wanted, is the stereotypical Indian. The Hollywood Indian is what we call it in Indian country, and
your regular spaghetti Western Indian.
Yeah, so you think a lot about like the old Westerns where they had like Asian people painted red.
Oh my gosh. Or white people,
or
Italians.
White people, Italians, Johnny Depp.
Don't even go there.
Sorry, you can cut that if you feel like.
No, keep it in. That's funny.
Yeah. So they have that kind of thing, and it perpetuates a lot of myths against our people, and there are so many filmmakers, indigenous filmmakers, aiming to break those stereotypes that are so ingrained into American and global culture. And it's so hard.
It is.
Yeah.
Because you have so many years of film, and people see on film and they think that that's real life, and it's like, you need to not do that anymore.
And it's hard to reverse it too.
It is very hard to reverse it. There's even some stereotypes that have become native culture
Taylor
because
Lautner,
of that.
Twilight.
Yeah, we're all werewolves,
Wolves.
guys.
Thank you for bringing it up. And cultural appropriation, it's obviously interconnected with those struggles that those tribes are facing.
Yes.
But I guess to close, a last point that I want to touch on, going back to how you guys are trying to keep your cultures alive. I've had the chance of attend a powwow. I think it was with Bethany.
Yeah.
How about you guys talk a little bit about powwows? What it is, what it signifies, why is it important to you?
So actually,
It's a gathering.
the powwow is
Yeah.
a Mashpee Wampanoag word,
Yeah.
and it literally, not literally, because translations are rough nowadays, but it's kind of means like magic man or like medicine gathering type deal. From what I've ceremony, yeah. But so to us, music is medicine.
Yeah.
Dancing is medicine, singing is medicine.
Some people aren't very good at practicing medicine.
Yeah,
but you know.
but they try, so that's all that counts. So powwow is just kind of we use powwow for recognition, camaraderie between in our tribe. Just celebrating us.
Yeah, I mean, I know Tobic has an annual powwow every year around the June, July area, and we have it's a celebration of our people at this point. That's what it's become is that, and I mean, like, you sharing your culture not only in song and dance, and you're sharing it in food and selling your wares, like the things that you've made, showing your skills that you've learned. Speaking your language is a big one.
That's a big part of it.
Yeah.
And I saw a lot of young people at the powwow that I attended, and that surprised me, of course, but in a happy way, that I see young people trying to get more, to help their culture progress and to keep that continuation going on. Do you see that as happening in the future?
I see it for sure.
Yeah, I know a lot of people. I personally am getting more into my culture. I'm trying to learn my language and understand it more. And I know there's issue with people far up north in Canada. They have nothing to do. So a lot of the elders are trying to get them more into their culture to have something to have them thrive, you know. And it's a struggle because there's so little left. There's so little documentation that you can't really. It's very, very difficult to get into it on your own. You would really have to speak with an elder.
Needs immersion.
You need to be right in the middle of a reserve with the elders, because sometimes they don't know who the hell you are. They're too old for this. You know, you have to go introduce yourself. You have to get into that, and it's very difficult. I feel very, very much for a lot of city Indians who have the issue of trying to get into their culture.
Yeah, it's hard. But my tribe back home has good programs set up. It's always good if they have a good program. I mean, it's not like funded well, but like
no, people
good,
are trying,
right? But you know, good sense of like our culture awareness, and you know, trying to start from an early age, learning the language, learning the histories, just all of that. It's important
I think
to start
Tobic
young.
has developed its own immersion program within the elementary school.
A lot of
so
tribes
they can do kindergarten to grade 6 by speaking their own language, and I think that is excellent.
And again, to reiterate, kind of on the East Coast, we're small. If you go out west, it's much bigger. They have, I feel like, not money-wise, I don't think it's bigger. Like they have at all, but I think they have a lot more people, so it's
they physically have
from
more
what
people.
I get,
and
it's a little bit easier for them to have bigger wider range of like, you know, like K through 12 or like college age students, and then like getting them all together and learning and sharing language, and
it's
that
easier
kind of
for
thing.
them to be immersed.
I
feel like
so much
we're
more.
very I hate to say this, but we're very cliquish over here.
Yeah,
actually,
we are.
And it's
over there they're like everybody's everybody.
Yeah, I showed up in Calgary, and they're like speaking Cree to me, and I'm like, bruh, I'm an Eastern Indian, I'm so sorry.
Like, I think Miranda told me something. She went to a powwow in, I think, Mexico. Not to I'm not going to shout out her last name, but she went to a powwow in New Mexico, and she was talking about how, like, they were all like, oh, what's your Indian name? And it's really important to them, specifically out there. Like, what's your name? Where are you from? Kind of thing.
Yeah.
And over here, it's kind of like, nah.
What's your Indian name? Kendra.
Yeah. Yeah. Whereas over there, they actually had their language, and they were, you know, they went through the process of getting that given to them.
It's a ceremony. It's a cultural thing, and I know theure are some people here with their
for sure
names.
There definitely
some of them
exists
were
born
here with native names. They were their parents chose them.
And I mean, I don't know if it's if I'm right or wrong with that, but I think your last name kind of has to do anything with that Bear-Perley.
Oh yeah, they're both huge. Like,
of course,
clans.
yeah. Like
you don't know the Bears or the Perleys.
but like the first time I read your last name, I saw the connection.
Yeah, definitely. For Bears, we were directly translated. Like our culture, or our clan was like
Bear Clan.
Bear Clan, yeah. Just bears. The word for that is Muin.
Yeah.
It means bear, obviously.
I think Kendra and I were discussing earlier at dinner. We were like, we're both bears.
Yeah, we're probably cousins.
Yeah.
Hey, cuz. But no, for Perley, it's much more complicated. The church came in and made them pick a name, and they're actually the Turtle Clan.
Yeah.
And my dad is very proud of that. He accidentally got a tortoise tattooed onto him, and love you, Dad.
Whoops.
But no, like, people are very aware of what their history is when it comes to Native people. If not, they find out pretty quickly.
Which is great. I mean, it's good to know your past. All right, we overpassed our time, but I have one last question that I think is really important. We'll get that through quickly. Okay. What is one hope that you wish for the future of Native tribes in America and the provinces as a young person?
And racism today.
Yeah.
It can be one word. It can be multiple words.
But what's
like your?
I want awareness. I want us to do stuff. You know, I feel like there's not enough stuff out there that's in the mainstream media. I want us to be mainstream. I want people to know who we are, what we're about, what's going on, and that we get it fixed.
I don't think I can say it any better than existence is resistance. And decolonize.
Yes.
That's my main thing. And just like recognition from everybody, governments and especially.
I feel like this is a Miss America pageant right now.
Yeah. What do you expect?
Existence is resistance.
And I think your points are brilliant, and thank you for sharing them with us. Do we have anything else?
I think that's
it.
Yeah,
All right.
I think we did good this time.
Well, that's all for today's episode of the History Hour. Thank you so much to our guest, Kendra, and sharing her feedback and all of her stories, and of course our very own Bethany, and sharing her very own perspective on it. Thank you so much, and we hope to see you at a future episode. Kendra and Bethany, you're always here.
Sure. I'm always here. You'll find me here every Wednesday.
So join us again next week when we talk about the myths in Norse mythology, bizarre Viking stories full of exploration, adventure, myth, and mistakes. And make sure you tune into WPI 92.1 FM next Saturday at 4 p.m. so you never miss an episode. Also, for previous or future episodes of the History Hour podcast, we are now available on both SoundCloud and YouTube. So make sure you search and like our History Hour podcast pages by simply searching History Hour Podcast. Till next time.
Bye.
See ya.
See ya.